the Empire called forth its greatest cadets to the Academy Hall, a chamber so vast that its walls seemed to vanish into shadow banners of red and black draped from the ceiling, their edges shimmering with threads of gold as if to remind all present of the glory and cruelty of the Empire itself. The air was heavy with incense and the bitter smell of oil from the torches that burned in iron braziers casting restless light across rows of armored figures. Each cadet stood tall, their armor polished to perfection, their boots lined in flawless formation, and yet behind their rigid postures, their hearts raced, for this was the day that came but once in a lifetime, the day of the choosing, when the war beast would emerge from its vault of iron and fire. The commanders of the Empire sat high upon the balcony above the hall, their faces masked with steel visors, their voices silent, their eyes like blades cutting down upon the cadets below. They had trained these young warriors for years, breaking them, reshaping them, testing them beyond limits, and now all their efforts would be judged, not by strategy, not by skill, not even by loyalty, but by the will of a creature no human fully understood. The war beast had served the Empire since its earliest wars. It had been bound through chains of science and blood. It was said to smell truth and falsehood, to see courage where others saw weakness, to bend its head only to those it deemed worthy. The cadets felt the weight of that truth pressing on them as they stood, their throats dry, their hands trembling though hidden within gauntlets. Some whispered prayers under their breath, others whispered nothing at all but clenched their jaws and locked their eyes upon the doors at the far end of the chamber, for all knew the beast would come through those doors, and once it entered there could be no hiding and no escape. Stories of the choosing had spread across generations, each tale more terrifying than the last. Some said the beast had once ripped apart an entire line of cadets who showed fearsome, said it ignored warriors of noble blood and bowed to one who was nameless. Some swore its eyes burned with the fire of fallen stars, and that those who looked too long into them went mad. Whatever the truth, the cadets knew that before the day was done one of them would leave the hall, not as a soldier but as a legend, bound to the war beast, chosen for glory or for ruin. For those whom the beast rejected often never rose again. Silent stretched across the hall like a blade, the only sound the faint hiss of torches and the echo of hearts beating in armored chests. Time seemed to hang in the air, unmoving, every cadet waiting, every commander watching, every shadow trembling. Then the ground shook once, the sound deep and heavy like the heartbeat of some slumbering titan, then again louder. The hall quivered, dust falling from the rafters, a roar built in the distance. Not the roar of a man, not the roar of a machine, but the roar of something ancient and alive, and it grew louder until the great steel doors at the far end trembled upon their hinges. The cadets tightened their formation, their bodies frozen, yet their spirits aflame, for they knew the moment had come, the moment when the war beast would enter, and with its entrance, the destiny of every soul in that hall would change forever. The war beast was no common animal. It was not born of forest nor field, but of fire and shadow, forged in the secret labs of the Empire, or so some whispered, while others swore it had come from a world long forgotten, a planet that burned itself to ash, leaving only this creature behind. Whatever its origin, no commander, no scholar, no warrior dared to deny its power, for it had walked the battlefields of centuries past, where legions crumbled and empires fell, and still it had survived. Carrying scars older than the halls, it now entered legions, spread among the cadets since the day they first trained, that the beast was bound by neither chain nor command, but by will alone. Some said it had the sight to look into the marrow of a soul, to sense not skill alone but the spark of destiny, and that when it chose its warrior, no blade, no army, no power could break that bond. One cadet in each generation was elevated by its choice, and from that moment their path was written in blood and in fire. That cadet became the weapon of the Empire, carrying the beast into battle the way a king carries a crown. The cadets in the hall knew this truth, for it had been whispered into their ears since childhood that to be chosen was glory beyond measure, but also burden beyond escape. Some dreamed of it, praying for the beast to see them. Others dreaded it, fearing the weight of such a bond, but all of them stood equal now in silence, waiting as the roar grew closer and the ground trembled beneath its steps. Commanders above leaned forward, their steel visors reflecting the light of the torches, their hands resting upon the rails of the balcony, some hungry with ambition, some cold with calculation, each hoping the beast would choose a cadet they could shape to their will, but none dared to interfere, for even the Empire itself obeyed the will of the beast. From the far shadows of the hall, the gates burst wide, light flared as sparks flew into the air, and smoke poured across the floor. Out of the darkness stepped the war beast, its body colossal, covered in plates of hardened flesh that glimmered like iron, its mane thick with scars that told of battles fought in worlds no cadet had ever seen. Its eyes glowed, a deep molten gold like suns, trapped within skull, and its teeth caught the firelight as it exhaled a breath so hot it seemed the air itself. Recoiled, the cadets felt the heat of that breath as the beast advanced, each step echoing like thunder, each claw striking sparks against the steel floor, its head lowered as it sniffed the air, a sound deep and guttural filling the silence like drums of war. Though none moved, none dared to break formation. They knew this was the test, the first trial of courage, for the beast chose not with mercy and not with favor. It passed judgment as old as war itself. One by one it would walk the line, one by one it would see into the hearts of the cadets, and in that moment their destinies would be revealed. The steel doors closed behind the war beast with a thunderous clang that echoed through the great hall, and for a moment the silence was absolute. The cadets stood like statues, their armor gleaming under the firelight, their eyes fixed upon the creature that now advanced through the haze of smoke, its massive form casting shadows that stretched across the walls like dark wings of fate. Bafta was vast and scarred, every line etched into its flesh, telling a story of battles fought long before the empire was born. Plates of bone, like armor, covered its shoulders while its claws gleamed as if sharpened by centuries of blood. The air seemed to grow heavier with each step, as if the hall itself could not bear the weight of its presence. Its breath rumbled like thunder rolling through distant mountains, its golden eyes scanning the line of cadets with the cold patience of a Cadets felt their throats tighten as it came closer. Some tried to steady their breathing, others clenched their fists until the gauntlets creaked. All had been trained to stand firm, yet training did little against the ancient fear that clawed at their hearts, for this was no drill, no staged exercise. This was the judgment of the war beast. The first cadet in line was a tall warrior from a noble house, his armor etched with the crest of his family. He met the gaze of the beast with pride and lifted his chin as though daring it to look deeper. The beast stepped close, so close that its hot breath washed over him like the wind from a furnace. It sniffed the air around him with a long, deep growl, then turned away. Without pause, the noble warrior remained standing, yet sweat rolled down his face beneath his helm, his pride unbroken but his heart hollow, for he knew the beast had dismissed him. The next cadet shook slightly, though she forced her knees to lock, her eyes flickering between defiance and fear. When the beast drew near, she could not hold its gaze. She looked to the floor, her breath ragged, and the beast moved past her without pause, leaving her trembling but alive. Step by step the war beast moved down the line, each cadet hoping, praying, dreading its decision. Its nostrils flared, its eyes glowed with hidden fire, its claws scraped against the floor, sparks scattering with each strike, and the sound echoed through the cavernous hall, louder than drums, louder than thunder. It was a rhythm that carved into the hearts of all who stood there. Some cadets held their ground like statues, their eyes hard and unyielding, yet the beast passed them by. Others could not hide the tremor in their stance, and the beast passed them too. It lingered for none, its movements steady and unhurried, as though it already knew what it was seeking, and that nothing would keep it from finding them. Lines stretched long, each cadet swallowed by the weight of the moment, yet the war beast did not falter. It was the hand of fate, moving through flesh and steel, searching not for strength, not for glory, not for rank, but for something far greater. Something hidden that no mortal eye could see, and with each step the tension in the hall grew tighter like a bowstring ready to snap. The war beast slowed its stride as it reached the heart of the line, its head swaying slightly from side to side, its nostrils widening as it drew in the scent of steel and sweat and fear. The cadets felt the heat of its breath upon their faces, each exhale a furnace wind that seemed to strip away every layer of pride and armor, until only the truth of their spirits remained. One cadet lifted his chin high, his jaw set, his eyes burning with defiance. As the beast drew near, he had trained harder than most, his body honed, his will sharpened by ambition. He thought himself ready to be chosen, yet when the beast loomed close, its eyes glowing like twin suns, the cadet felt his heart hammering wildly. He did not falter outwardly, but within, the beast sensed the tremor of doubt, the crack in his spirit, and so with a low rumble, it turned its head and stepped past him, leaving him hollow and broken. Though he still stood tall, another cadet stood next in line, her frame smaller, her armor worn at the edges. She was no noble child, no heir to generals, yet She had endured more trials than most. She clenched her fists as the beast approached its claws, scraping sparks upon the steel floor. Her breath came, shallow, but her eyes never wavered. She stared into its golden gaze, unflinching, and for a long moment the beast seemed to pause. It leaned close, its snout almost brushing her helm, and the hall held its breath. Yet, at last, it turned and moved on, leaving her heart both shattered and burning with the knowledge that she had been seen though not chosen. The march continued, each step of the beast like a drumbeat. In the silence, cadets felt their strength drain as it passed. Some shivered, though they forced their bodies to remain. Still others clenched their jaws until their teeth ground against one another. None could escape the truth, for the beast peeled away their masks and looked upon the core of who they were. Cadet from the Central Worlds stood trembling, though he prayed none would see his fear. He had been told all his life that greatness was his birthright. His armor gleamed brighter than most, his crest polished and proud. But as the beast neared, his knees quivered, his hands shook. He tried to steady himself, yet the beast gave him only a single glance before moving past, its growl deep and dismissive, leaving him shaking and exposed before all who watched. Whispers stirred among the commanders above, though none spoke aloud. They exchanged silent glances, their steel visors catching the light. They too wondered what the beast sought. What hidden spark would draw its loyalty? For it had passed the strongest, it had passed the most skilled, it had passed the heirs of the most powerful houses. Still, it continued onward, unhurried, unstoppable, as if guided by fate itself. The cadets knew then that strength alone would not win the favor of the war. Beast nor lineage nor glory, it was searching for something more, and with each step the weight of that truth grew heavier upon their shoulders. The war beast moved steadily past the cadets, its massive frame gliding like shadow over steel. The air around it seemed to bend with each step, its eyes glowing molten gold, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air, testing for courage, testing for spirit, testing for that invisible spark that no training could create and no rank could command. The cadets stood frozen, their armor glinting in the firelight, their hearts hammering in their chests, their hands trembling though they held them at their sides. Some dared to glance sideways, others lowered their heads as if hiding from the judgment of destiny. 8 passed the son of the Empire General, the young man who had trained since birth to inherit command, his armor polished to blinding perfection, his stance perfect. Yet inside him doubt clawed at his mind, and the war beast did not linger. It sniffed once, its nose brushing his helm, then moved on, leaving the cadets stiff and hollow, while whispers ran through the hall at the thought that bloodlines and privilege could not sway the creature. It moved past the fastest runner, the sharpest marksman, the ones who carried medals of courage and battle experience in every generation. The most decorated cadets were expected to be chosen, but the beast ignored them all, its gaze unbroken, its judgment absolute, and the spectators felt the air grow thick with tension, every heartbeat stretching into eternity, as though time itself waited for the moment the beast would stop. A creature approached the daughters of noble houses, who stood in their armor gleaming and elegant, their eyes daring it to look upon them with favor. They had trained their bodies and minds for this day. Yet the war beast sniffed the air around them and passed without a pause, its massive claws striking sparks into the floor, the metallic echo like the drumbeat of fate, warning all that destiny could not be bargained for, nor earned through arrogance. A cadet from the frontier colonies stood quiet in the shadow of those around him. He was plain in appearance, his armor dull, his stature unremarkable. He had endured hardship far from the halls of privilege. He had fought hunger and storms. He had carried burdens no noble child had known. He breathed slowly, waiting for the beasts to pass like all the others, expecting rejection as it had passed, the proudest of warriors. Yet the hall seemed to hold its breath as the creature slowed slightly, its head tilting, its nose coming closer than ever before, sniffing the air around him with deliberate care. Whispers stirred through the crowd. Commanders leaned forward, their hands tightening on railings, none daring to speak, their eyes wide with disbelief and awe. The cadets, who had stood tall and proud, felt their knees weaken. The hall itself seemed to lean closer, straining to see the moment the war beast would make its choice, its stride heavy yet purposeful, moving past all but one, as if destiny itself walked upon iron and fire. At the far end of the line, the human cadet stood alone, plain in armor, worn from years of trials, his hands tight at his sides, his breath steady, yet measured, his eyes calm, as if he had already known this moment would come. He was not the tallest, nor the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the most decorated, yet something unseen simmered within him, a quiet strength, a resilience, born of hardship and survival, that no luxury or lineage could replicate. The war beast slowed its massive steps as it approached him, the hall falling into a silence so thick that the echo of each claw strike seemed to vibrate in the bones of every cadet present. Its golden eyes fixed upon the human in a stare that burned as though it could pierce the soul. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, the torches flickering, as if bowing to the intensity of the gaze. The cadets and commanders alike could feel the weight of judgment pressing upon them as the beast drew nearer, inch by inch, its nostrils flaring, its massive head lowering ever so slightly. The human cadet did not flinch, he did not bow, he did not speak, he merely waited, his body tense, yet relaxed, his eyes meeting the molten stare of the creature without fear yet without arrogance. He felt the heat of the beast against his face, the tremor of its breath washing over him, and for a long moment, time itself seemed to stop, the hall holding its collective breath. The air heavy with the scent of sweat, steel, and destiny. The war beast circled slowly around him, sniffing the air close to his helmet, brushing against the armor that had been worn plain and battered. It paused as if considering every detail, from the cadence of his breath to the rhythm of his heartbeat. It stepped closer, tilting its massive head to the side, sniffing the faintest scent of resolve and quiet courage that rose from the cadet like a flame in the darkness. The cadets behind him stiffened their fists, some mouths opening in shock, some eyes wide in disbelief. The commanders leaned forward as if straining to see into the mind of the beast, the tension in the hall so thick that it seemed to vibrate through the floor, the very air charged with anticipation, as the creature lowered itself slowly, its massive claws scraping sparks along the floor, and with a deep guttural sound that reverberated like rolling thunder, it paused, its head at the level of the cadet. For the first time in the history of the Empire, the hall heard no roar of dismissal, no growl of disdain, no sign of rejection, only the quiet rumble of the beast settling its massive body onto the floor, its bulk dwarfing the cadet, yet somehow bowing in recognition. The human stood frozen for a heartbeat, then reached a trembling hand and placed it upon the furred head of the war beast, feeling the heat and the power flowing through the creature, and in that instant a bond was sealed, unspoken, unbreakable, and the hall erupted with whispers, awe, and disbelief. The choice had been made, the one no one expected. The plain human cadet had been recognized and claimed by the war beast, its loyalty granted forever, and from that moment destiny shifted its weight, and all eyes in the Empire turned to witness a legend being born. The hall trembled with the weight of astonishment as the human cadet stood with his hand upon the war beast's head. The massive creature settled fully onto the floor, its golden eyes fixed upon him, unwavering, its body breathing in slow, powerful rhythms that filled the chamber like a pulse of ancient fire. Cadets behind him whispered nervously, some hearts pounding with awe, others with envy, for none could believe that the beast had passed them all, and stopped for this one ordinary figure. Leaned over the railings above their steel visors, reflecting sparks of torchlight, their hands tightening upon the edges. They had trained generations to produce warriors worthy of the beast's favor, yet here it had chosen one they had overlooked, a cadet from the outer colonies, plain, unremarkable, and yet glowing with a hidden strength. The realization struck them like a hammer that greatness could not be commanded nor manufactured, it had to be earned in ways invisible to the eye. The other cadets shifted uneasily, their pride cracking their confidence, trembling, for some had counted on being the one chosen, their muscles stiff with disbelief, their hearts gnawing at the edges of fear. The noble children of generals, the fastest, the strongest, the most decorated, all had been passed over, and they could feel the weight of the hall pressing down upon them. The lesson was clear, the war beast chose not for show or rank, but for the spark that could not be faked. The human cadet remained still, his hand pressed gently against the warm fur of the beast's head, feeling the subtle rise and fall of its chest, the heat of its breath upon his fingers, the power contained within its massive frame, and for a moment he felt, not fear but understanding, a silent agreement forming between them, an unspoken promise of loyalty and protection. The beast had tested him, and he had passed without question, and now their destinies were linked forever. The war beast growled low and slow, a sound that resonated through the stone floor, the vibration cutting through the hall, commanding attention without words, and the cadets who had been passed stepped back, their shoulders slumping as the full truth settled in, that this was the one, the chosen one, the one whom no strength or training could surpass, yet whose courage and resilience had been seen and claimed. Whispers of astonishment moved through the spectators like wind through trees. Some cadets dared not breathe, others could barely contain their astonishment, some mouths hung open, others clenched tight in frustration. Yet none could deny the power of what had transpired. The human and the war beast now formed a bond that surpassed fear and respect, their connection undeniable, and the very walls of the academy seemed to pulse with the weight of history. The commanders exhaled slowly, their hands loosening from the railings, knowing that a new legend had begun, one that would be told for generations, one that would remind all who sought favored that courage and resilience mattered more than bloodline or skill. The hall itself seemed to acknowledge the moment, the sparks from the beast's claws falling harmlessly upon the floor like rain of destiny, and in that instant the Empire witnessed something it could not control, a union of power and heart. Chosen by the ancient war beast itself, the hall had barely recovered from the shock of the war beast's choice, when a ripple of tension moved through the air, some cadets whispering nervously, some commanders leaning forward with clenched fists. The alliance between human and beast had not gone unnoticed, and the weight of expectation pressed upon every soul present, for they knew the Empire did not suffer weakness lightly, and the story of this moment would spread far and wide, changing everything. The human cadet felt the heat of the beast's presence like a shield around him. The massive frame shifted slightly, moving closer, protecting him in a way no human could replicate. It lowered its head just enough to encompass him in its shadow, a living wall of muscle and fury, yet its eyes never left his own, a silent communication passing between them, a mutual understanding that they would face whatever came next together. And unbroken whisper rippled through the cadets behind him, their confidence faltering, some mouths opening in awe, some in disbelief, for they had all imagined that rank and skill could earn the beast's favor, yet it had chosen a cadet who bore neither titles nor medals, who had survived hardship unknown to most, yet had proven his worth through something deeper, something intangible, that no training could teach. The commanders exhaled slowly, their eyes narrowing behind steel visors, their hands relaxing from the railings. They had expected power to bow to hierarchy, yet here was proof that true merit was measured differently, courage, resilience, and spirit. Seen by the beast, and nothing else mattered. The hall seemed to shift as though acknowledging the presence of fate walking among them, the torches flickering and casting shadows that danced like silent witnesses to the moment's solidity. A low rumble vibrated through the floor as the war beast shifted its bulk, its claws scraping sparks across the polished stone. The sound rolled like thunder, filling the hall with tension. The cadets instinctively straightened their backs, some hearts hammering, others frozen in place. The creature let out a low guttural growl, a warning without threat, aimed not at them, but at the invisible pressures that would test their chosen one. The human cadet stepped closer to the beast's massive head, his fingers brushing the rough fur, the heat radiating into his hands. He could feel the pulse of life within the creature, the quiet rhythm of strength controlled by instinct yet tethered to him through that unspoken bond. In that moment he understood that the beast was more than power, it was judgment, it was guidance, it was loyalty made flesh, and together they were unstoppable. The cadets who had been passed shuffled uneasily, the nobles, the proudest, the most decorated, all feeling the weight of the hall pressing down upon them. The commanders silent yet aware that this alliance could rewrite expectations for generations to come. The sparks from the beast's claws fell harmlessly onto the floor, yet they felt like falling stars, signaling a new era, a moment when a single human had claimed what none thought possible. In that hall the air was alive with awe and fear, with whispers of destiny, with the knowledge that history was being written in real time, and that the human cadet and the war beast were now inseparable, bound together by the judgment of ancient power and the courage of one unremarkable yet extraordinary soul, a legend in the making. The hall seemed to hold its breath as the human cadet stood beside the war beast, their bond now undeniable. The massive creature shifted, slightly resting its head on the floor yet keeping its golden eyes fixed upon the cadet, as if declaring that it would follow him beyond this hall, beyond the Empire, and beyond any danger that dared approach their unity complete and unbroken. The air crackled with the presence of power, and destiny ran through the cadets behind them, some awe-filled, others bitter with envy, for they had all witnessed greatness, claimed not by lineage, not by training, but by the spark of courage, resilience, and heart, and none could argue with the judgment of the beast. The commanders leaned forward, their hands tight on the railings, their eyes narrowing, yet their breaths slow, for they understood the implications. The Empire itself had witnessed a moment that would be spoken of in hushed tones for generations. A single human had been elevated above all, and the war beast had chosen him. The human cadet placed a hand upon the beast's head, feeling the warmth of its breath brushing against his fingers, the rhythm of its chest pulsing beneath his hand, a living heartbeat of power and loyalty. He felt the weight of responsibility settle into his shoulders, yet it did not crush him, it strengthened him, and in return, the beast seemed to respond to his touch, shifting closer so that the shadow of its bulk enveloped him, a silent promise that no force could break. The cadets who had been past looked on, their pride faltering, their confidence shaken, their whispers spreading through the hall like wildfire, for the story was clear: nothing mattered more than courage. Nothing could sway the choice of the beast except what lay in the heart of the cadet. The hall itself seemed to hum with energy sparks, falling from the claws of the war beast as if to mark the beginning of a legend. The commanders rose slowly, their faces hidden behind steel visors, yet their posture carrying the weight of respect and acknowledgement, for they knew this was a moment the Empire could not erase. The human and the war beast had formed a bond older than law, older than rank, older than all expectation, and in that instant history shifted its course, and the cadets and the Empire knew that greatness could come from the most unlikely of places. The war beast rose partially on its massive legs, tilting its head toward the cadet, a gesture that spoke louder than words, its eyes molten gold, burning with recognition and loyalty, and the cadet nodded in return, his heart steady, his mind clear, his body ready for whatever challenges would come, for together they were unstoppable. Together they were the living embodiment of destiny and courage. As the hall erupted in whispers, awe, and quiet reverence, the human cadet took his first steps beside the war beast, the ground trembling beneath its weight, the banners of the Empire swaying above, as if bowing to the moment, and the story of that day would echo forever in the hearts and minds of all who witnessed it. The plain human, who had endured hardship, the cadet no one expected, had been chosen by the war beast, and the legend had begun, a tale that would never be forgotten.